Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get started for our afternoon session. Thank you for joining us. Our topic this afternoon is the University System of Georgia Executive Dashboards, Realizing Data-Driven Decision-Making. Our special presenters for this afternoon's session include Brian Haugabrook. Brian has held numerous positions in higher ed over 15 years, including Director of Enterprise Applications and Analytics and Chief Information Officer at Valdosta State University. Brian's work in higher ed has led to numerous awards, including University Business Models of Excellence and Models of Efficiency, OVM in the Radar, USG Chancellor's Gold Award, and Computer World's 2015 Premier 100 IT Leaders. In addition, Brian has served on the USG College 2025 committee that identified priorities to grow the talent pipeline and improve academic alignment with high demand professions in the state. Also joining Brian is Richard Loftus, who is no stranger to Georgia Tech. Rich has been 35 years in higher education and the last 20 years in the University System of Georgia. For the last 4 years, he's overseen a broad range of projects designed to improve overall experiences for students, faculty, and staff. Rich manages strategic implementation staff that provides governance, project management, change management, and system integration for all major USG-wide projects involving the integration of people, processes, and technology. Please welcome our presenters this afternoon.
Thank you, David. David should have just said Rich is old. We also have Tiffany Palmer here with us, who's going to be driving during the demo and also here to answer some questions at the end. Tiffany was excellent on this project that we're going to be talking to you about today. What I wanted to do is give you a little background on the project. So the chancellor called me into his office and said, "Rich, do you know why you're here?" And I said, "No, I have no idea." And he said, "I heard you could get some things done." And I said, "Okay, what do you want me to do?" He goes, "I want dashboards." That was it. I want dashboards. When I asked him what he meant by a dashboard, he said, "Well, did you ever see a scoreboard at a football game? I want scoreboards like that. I want to know what's happening around here." So we started a campaign. We did a process where we interviewed a lot of our directors. We got over 70 replies on potential dashboards that we can use. And then we realized we had a large mess on our hands. Like, some of the dashboards were very detailed so we could do something with them. Some were very vague, like, I need a dashboard on world peace. We didn't create any of those. So what happened next is we contracted with Deloitte, and Brian's going to tell you a little bit about our approach going forward.
Yeah. So when we met with Rich and the USG executive team, it was a pretty big challenge. They wanted the scoreboard feature, but they also wanted to look at things from a strategic standpoint, but then also from a functional standpoint. And so when we went in, we knew, from my time in USG at Valdosta State, I knew there was a lot of data sources within USG, over 20 instances of Banner, multiple instances of PeopleSoft, and then a Workday instance. And so we knew starting out, we really had to very quickly understand what the current state is. From there, we then had to work with sort of understanding what is that vision, but then you have so many different departments, leaders in USG. How do we really put together a strategy that really encompasses and can address a lot of the needs across the different areas within the system office? From there, it became sort of building this proof of concept. We'll get to a slide there, but we had an all-day workshop at the system office in the large boardroom where we really had different stations to try to get everybody to really sort of participate in this exercise of what is a dashboard? What does it mean to me? How do I get insights to make decisions? From there, we then had this rapid development, and all of this happened within about a 6-month time frame. So pretty collaborative, and like I said, we'll go through some of those examples throughout this presentation.
Yeah, and I'll talk a little bit about the outcomes. Initially, we were asking people what they would want on a dashboard, and they would come to me and say, "Rich, I don't know what you even mean by a dashboard. What are you talking about?" So we have several iterations of meetings with staff. And once we started to create these dashboards, now everybody wants to create a dashboard. So it's a good problem to have. So we are actually working on a phase 2 right now. But it was really an iterative process, and Deloitte was very helpful in bringing people together. And we'll talk a little bit about the approach, but we're going to go pretty quick through the slides because we want to really get to the demonstration of the actual outputs. Oops, sorry, Brian.
All right, and I'll go through this pretty quickly. So here again are those 5 phases. Number 1 was data discovery. This was sort of think about it as a current state, but not a typical current state where we're getting down very detailed, trying to create a map. Again, we had 6 months, so we had to do this very quickly. The road mapping, a lot of interviews with all the different areas. So those from academics, student success, we had finance, capital projects, even room utilization. So almost every area within the system, we had to quickly collect this feedback to sort of build this roadmap and future state. Project governance was important because there are so many different data sets. How do you use it? We're now bringing in new data that hasn't been visualized before, what things are going to be available internally, and then even thinking about future state and some concepts of how do we present some data publicly as part of what the chancellor wanted. Proof of concept, one of my favorite phases of this project, where we brought everybody together in this all-day workshop. Again, think about the boardroom. If you've been there, having posters of wireframes across that entire boardroom, and now we're having conversation about what does a dashboard look like? And even that day, and we'll get to the slide, how, we had different opinions. And so we had to really come to a consensus, and that consensus ended in these really high polished wireframes. And that led to this really rapid development. Development started, I think, in April. Everything was released in August. So those 5 phases are really our blueprint of how can we rapidly do this, but also deploy about 12 different dashboards across all the areas of USG.
So we're going to talk now a little bit about the future state recommendations. We also asked Deloitte, with all of that they've seen, what should we do as a system to move forward? So they did a very good job making some roadmaps, not only for what we needed to do, but also resourcing it, how we would possibly resource it. And the chancellor has a saying, I don't know if you've all heard him say, good, better, best. That's his. We have a lot of good data right now, but we had it published in PDFs on our website, and it wasn't, you weren't able to really drill down on it. So he wanted to take that, make us a little bit better. And, our goal in the end is to be the best university system in the country. So Brian, I'll turn it over to you for.
I would say part of any initiative when it comes to this is, you obviously have to deal with the data, but then how do you build a platform that not only addresses what you're doing right now, but thinking about the future as well. I was having a conversation a minute ago about, a lot of institutions are thinking about AI. All of that AI even depends on data. We know there's a lot of analytics that are going to depend on data. So we really had to work with USG to think about not only how do we meet this current need in 6 months, but also thinking longer term in the future. So thinking about not only the people, their processes, governance, but also the platform and how that can evolve. They were leveraging the Azure platform, but even within Azure, how do we think about getting data from Banner, from Oracle, even thinking about some of the new initiative that is going on across the system now. And so that future state has to really encompass all of that. Now, does that mean that it's not going to change? There's a lot of AI conversations. There may be other things, but also part of this is, we don't want to box you into a certain approach. So you want to be able to build things. You can have some level of being agnostic. If something does change, we can pivot in the future. But that future state was very important, both from a leadership standpoint, technical, operational, functional, and strategic.
Yeah, and we'll touch on some of the actual things that we ran into for the future state. And we have some things in flux right now where we're actually loading the data, what I'll call manually, on some of the dashboards, but some of the dashboards are automated. So we're growing using the Power BI stack and the Power BI tools. That was a choice because we had already licensed it, so that was a benefit. I know I've spoken on this topic to several different groups, and there's like a religion between Tableau and Power BI, and I don't want to go there, but we're using, we chose Power BI. So this is a dashboard proof of concept. So Brian, you want to talk about the idea, and then I'll talk about how it went?
Yeah, so the idea of this workshop is to, let's think about, number one, we want to bring all the leadership, all of the key stakeholders in the same room. Let's talk about this all-day workshop. And there was a series of events. Part of this concept, too, is how do you consume data on a day-to-day basis? We didn't want to put out a bunch of links to say, all right, go to this link for this dashboard, somewhere else for another. Part of our strategy is what we call this sort of interconnected dashboard framework, or what you'll see is what we call the Launchpad station. You'll see that in the demo, but how do we thread all of these things together? So as we start as the current state, you can now navigate between dashboards to get different insights, but also part of the stations in the workshop where we call informed insights is, I don't need to see, we don't need to see a dashboard on what's the USG enrollment. Most of the executives are going to know that number. What's truly important about enrollment to help them make a decision? How is it growing? What regions in the state? Are there certain areas where we need to do better at? So the informed insights was all about how do we now address key questions that are important to USG, but also can map back to the strategic plan. So when you see about the informed insights and the capabilities, everything we wanted to build, every KPI had to have a purpose, had to align with the strategic plan and support whether it was an operational, functional, or strategic need.
Yeah, and I'll talk a little bit about once we had these three stations, it really got people to start thinking. We were kind of like all stuck on what is a dashboard, how are we going to create a dashboard, and this workshop really pulled out a lot of information and things from individuals that created an excitement for this project. We went through a lot with it. We learned a lot in this workshop. The Deloitte team had experts there, and we learned about that's where we first learned about the Q&A that we'll show you later, chat type bot. We also learned about embedding it in PowerPoint, things like that. This was, again, early on, but this got leadership at our system. This got them excited about the project and really helped us move it forward. So these are the actual dashboards that we developed. We developed these 12 student enrollment, course enrollment. All right, student enrollment, course enrollment, retention, grad rate. These are all normal dashboards that you might find, but these are for everything within the system. And then we worked on some that were more in functional areas like human resources, vacancies, vacant positions like throughout the whole system, capital projects for the whole system, student success. And these are the bottom four are our strategic goals. One of the challenges we had along the way, as you can see on this slide, we just have 11 weeks. Our strategic plan was being built while we were building this dashboard. So they didn't have the metrics defined for us yet. So we were like building certain ones that we knew before the other ones were finalized. And we actually built it all out. And then the board approved, like 3 days later, the board approved the strategic plan. So I was a super happy person that they did that because we already had these all built out. So Brian, do you want to talk a little bit about the data sources?
Yeah, I think to really pull this off in 11 weeks, I mean, when I first saw the timeline and knew that we were late getting the strategic plan 2029, it really scared me pretty bad to know that we had to do this in such a short timeline. But it really became, we had to focus on building very robust data models, making it where once we got into Power BI, it became mostly just sort of drag and drop. And so we put a lot of focus working with Rich and the teams at ITS within IRP to come up with really comprehensive data models across all of these different subjects. We leveraged a lot of work that the system had been doing for years when it comes to some of the official data sets that are published. But then we had new data sets that had to come in as well, things like capital projects or automating some of the room utilization processes. So there was a lot of new steps that we had to do. But again, it took that sort of collaboration between our team, USG, to really pull out the data models so that once we got into the development cycles, we're able to really iterate pretty quickly. To do this in 11 weeks, I mean, I think every day we might have been on the call 2 to 3 hours a day, meeting with different teams. But it does show you that with the right approach, with the right collaboration, you actually can really get a lot accomplished when it comes to analytics and insights in a short amount of time.
And so where we ended up is the concept of a launch pad. We needed some place to start where you can get to all of our different dashboards, and you'll see that in the center, and you'll see it better in the demonstration. But we started with a launch pad with two concepts: having functional dashboards, which would be more used by department heads and folks in that area, as well as the strategic dashboards, all of the strategic plan. One of the scary things about all of this is when we created the functional dashboards and showed them to the chancellor, he wanted to give everybody access to all of them. So I had to go explain to each data owner, everybody's going to see everything you have in your dashboard right now. Is that going to be okay? And I got to say, everybody stepped up and said, sure, we'll make sure it works. And I'll show you some examples where we have bad data in our systems, and we have to clean that data up. And that was part of this project too, to see, like in the vacancy dashboard, we don't have as many vacant positions as it shows, and we have a lot of cleanup to do in that area as an example. And then Brian, do you want to talk about the design framework?
Yeah, so one thing, I've noticed over the years, especially being in higher ed, I remember 12 years ago building my first dashboard as part of some of the Complete College America. We had the Complete College Georgia initiative. We published these dashboards, but they rarely got used. The only people who were really using it was the IR staff, one or two people in enrollment management. And when I started asking people, I got sort of two different answers. One, they didn't know where the link was to their specific report. There was no real easy navigation. The other thing, I had a long, like a 3-hour drive with a dean, and he was like, it needs to be simple. And he used the analogy. I know Rich used the chancellor used the scoreboard. His analogy was it should be just like my dashboard in a car. I can quickly see and get to all the key things that I need to. And if there's more details, there is a way to get to it, but from that main dashboard. And so that was the idea of this launch pad. You go to one location, and if you're looking for student success, which is academic or responsible stewardship, you can quickly now navigate to a strategic dashboard. Or if you want to get more details on the functional, as you'll see in the demo, you can do that as well. So the navigation aspect of these dashboards and this framework is really important to how we can make a better design, but also make it where we know that it's going to be useful to those who need the data.
Yeah, and when we were doing our dashboard, so we got the strategic plan done. It was being voted on at the August board meeting. And when we demonstrated to leadership, they turned to me and said, okay, could you get this on the website by September 1st? And I was like, okay, how do we do that? So we worked with our web team, and we came up, and all of this is available to you all. You could see it publicly. We have our strategic plan dashboards out there. And we had to do some configuring because our internal dashboards obviously had some identifiable data in them because we're using them internally. So we had to do a good bit of work, and we continue to do that to redact some of the information so that that identity information is not out there. So Brian, you want to talk about the public?
Yeah, I think you touched on it. So as Rich mentioned, the internal dashboards, they're really designed to give that granularity of information. For public dashboards, we took an approach, even though within Power BI, we can, aggregate the data and publish it and disconnect it from the database. We want to really make sure that we're taking every security protocol possible. So even our data models, data sets, we want to rebuild specifically for a public-facing purpose. And so that's what we did. But Trish kind of highlighted, he got their word in August, and we had to do this by September. Again, another very quick turnaround. But again, working with the teams, we were able to make some, that first sort of version 1 of the public-facing dashboards. I know, Rich, there's probably more coming out here.
Yep. So we're going to pivot. That's most of our PowerPoint. We have a question and answer slide we'll come back to, and the survey slide on the session, but we're going to transition now. Tiffany's going to pull up the actual dashboards for us, and we're going to walk through some so you can see what we've done and ask any questions related to it. One of the things why she's doing that, that came out is the chancellor's, he calls himself an old jock, and he's very competitive. So he basically, we thought we'd have to, redact data. If you're logging in from Georgia Tech, you'd only see Georgia Tech data. If you're logging in from Kennesaw, and he's like, no. I want my siblings, he calls the 26 institutions, to all compete. So I want them to see each other's data. And that was a little bit of a surprise to me. But I think it's been a good approach, because as we use these dashboards, people are seeing what the others are doing. And, if we're looking at things like military, number of military students, how are they keeping adult learners, those type of things, you could call that school and say, how are you doing this? How are your numbers up when our numbers are down, et cetera. We good? All right, so we're going to start off by going to, so there's two options here. You got the strategic plan goals on the left, and then the functional areas on the right. And then we're going to start by going to the student success dashboard. And so these are the KPIs we were related to the strategic plan as it relates to our 2029 plan. So these are the KPIs that came out relatively late in the game, so we were working on them. And one of the things I always tell people, we had a little bit of a challenge with these little triangles, the green and red. So red going down means it's not good. That goal is to go up. And green going down, it's good if we're trying to lower the price or a cost of attendance. So you'll see that quite often. I'm stalling a little bit to see if you're there. No, you're good. You're good. And so these KPIs, I get to show the dashboard to you all, but a lot of people did a lot of work behind the scenes. Our research policy and analysis team pulled all this information together and shared it with us and the Deloitte team. So it was really a big effort for everybody. I just get on the end and get to present it. And I'm trying to get the stigma where somebody calls it Rich's dashboards. I don't want these to be Rich's dashboards. They're our dashboards. So conceptually here we have across the top the four different, the other three goals. So we're on student success, and then we're going to drill down in student success into the KPI. And you could get to some more detail. And you'll see on the left, we have slicers, and this is a consistent model that we did for everyone. The slicers are all similar, always on the left. So you're going to select a sector.
A specific sector. So with our filters, we have years, we have sectors, institutions, and race and ethnicity.
Go ahead.
So you have the ability to filter out. So a lot of the student focused data has a lot of the same filters as of right now, pulling from the RDS. One of the cool things about these dashboards, even on the strategic side, you can really narrow things down. That was the goal, to be able to bring in all this data from all these different places, but make it really easy to find what you're looking for. So for an example, for this one, we're looking at, in-state enrollment. We're looking at research universities. We can pick, maybe Georgia Tech. And then from here, you really can go down and see what data you would like to focus on. So you can play around with things like this. All of our visualizations will change depending on whatever you filter it to. If there was something that you really wanted to focus on, you wanted to see in a larger scale, you can do focus mode. And that information can pop up here, and all this stuff is able to be printed out as well.
One thing I'll highlight, so you only see, 6 or so filters here. The data model behind this has probably about 50 attributes. So as USG wants to expand, or maybe there are some that are internally only exposed to certain people, we built the data model with that in mind. So here you only see just a small fraction of the actual data model behind the scenes here.
At this point. Okay.
Tiffany, do you want to go back to the front page on the KPIs and hit the question mark too? Because I forgot to, when we put some information in there that could actually tell you more about the actual KPI as you're going through it. So you'll see what each one of them is and how it's being calculated by doing the help. And that's a design that we did throughout all of the dashboards. Anytime you hit that question mark, you're going to get helpful information regarding the dashboard itself. So thank you.
Let's do
Responsible stewardship.
So at the top here, like Rich mentioned, at the top, we are able to navigate between all the other strategic dashboards. So you are able to kind of click in and then go directly to that one. But of course, magic, we already have it up. And so the next one will be responsible stewardship.
So again, these are the KPIs behind responsible stewardship, and you'll see the average loan amount. Again, it's red because it's going up for our students. We're trying to drive that down. And you'll see all the other KPIs. So we wanted to hit on, which one are we?
We're going to go to time to degree.
Yeah.
And with the focus on that green going down, which is ideal. And then again, some really cool things. We have the ability to compare. So being able to compare by sector. And if you wanted to break that down more, you can do it by institution. Just a lot of options when it comes to these dashboards, and even more when we get into functional dashboards.
Right.
So I'm going to transition over, go back to the Launchpad again. That's where our one-stop shop for everything. And then from here, we are on the strategic plan goals. We can switch over to functional areas.
Yeah, so what we've done here is we've built space, understanding that these functional areas are going to grow. Obviously, our focus on the academic side, we have a good number of dashboards there, but we'll also be adding more financial aid, human resources, facilities, and we have several finance dashboards that we're working on right now. We'll continue to add to this. Once it gets unwieldy, we'll figure out what to do with it after we get a bunch of them in there. But this is kind of the concept. They'll be able to come in here to each of those. So we're going to go to retention on this one.
Yep. So naturally, you'll click on it, go to retention, but we already have it up for you all. The magic of technology. All right.
And you'll see when we were looking at this one, we're like, whoa, what happened in fall of 20? But everybody knows what happened in fall of 20, right? So we talked about the scale on this. We could adjust the scale, but we didn't want to do anything because, that's a critical component. A lot of our strategic plan goals are to get back to where we were before COVID hit, back to those numbers. So we've been working on that along the way. And then, so this again is the executive view. You see at the top, we have 3 different views. So this is really the Chancellor's scoreboard, like a quick look at where do we stand, what's our cohort count, et cetera, those type of things. And then if he wanted to see the actual detail, he can. And then we could go to informed insights. And you could actually drill down deeper. This is if he wanted to see more or a leader wanted to see more, they can continue to drill down and again, filter on the different topics. And we built some filters in that we thought were important to the strategic plan, or someone thought were important to the strategic plan. So you could click on those filters and it will adjust if you click on first generation there. It'll adjust all the totals and go ahead, Tiffany.
And it stacks on top of it on itself. So if you're looking for, the example I use, if you're looking for a certain institution, you want to see maybe African-American female students who are Pell eligible, as well as first generation, you can get down to that granularity.
One thing on the data model on these buttons. So when we met with USG, you all track, did I receive Pell this year? Or well, adding learning support. So we actually added different calculations. So if anytime we want to see what's this student ever Pell, or what's this student ever X. So we built some more longitudinal variables so you can easily click here whether you're looking, does this student meet this indicator for this term, or were they ever this in any term, current or in the past? That really added. A lot of that work within the.
Yeah, and then we have, a lot of our students will transfer from one institution to another, so the retention rate of the institution they left goes down. So we decided we needed to show that as a system-wide view. So if the toggle at the top allows for us to go to a system-wide view and see what our retention rates are within the system. And we're going to continue to improve on that because, as the chancellor says, we are one system, so we need to rely on that and make sure we're following that. And then they did some really cool information in between, like selecting the 2-year retention rate and 3-year retention rate. Tiffany, I'll let you go if you want to.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So we wanted to be able to see that broad scale of retention rate across the board. So we wanted to focus on that first year, 1 year all the way to 4 year. And again, really being able to play around with these filters as well. So if you wanted to see associates retention, you really can get down to that granularity when it comes to specific student populations. And when it comes to retention rate. And we also, like I said, we have graduation rates as well. So with that same similar format.
Brian mentioned some of these filters, like were they ever in dual enrollment? Did they start in dual enrollment? And so we could see how dual enrollment students are doing across as compared to those who didn't take dual enrollment. So there's a lot of information out there when you start slicing and dicing. And this is the rich button, clear all filters. That's when I get lost. I just hit that button at the bottom. We have that on every one of these dashboards because I do go crazy and then can't remember where I am, so I just click clear all filters quite often. And then we have an exploratory view. This was more of something we can do where you can personalize your own graphs based on the data. So you could go in and actually change the graph type by personalizing it. You can, go ahead, Tiffany.
So just a small one. If you wanted to change the view, if you wanted to change what you were looking at, this is a completely personalizable visualization. So you can say, I don't want to compare institution-wide versus system-wide. I want us to compare male versus female. Whatever you would like to compare, you have the ability to kind of look at the data behind it, put whatever visualizations you want in, and then you can save that if you want to keep that as something that's always done.
And Rich likes pie charts, and researchers don't like pie charts. They're useless. They look pretty good to me. So then we have the comparison tools. So you want to talk about that a little bit?
And sure. So the whole point of exploratory is really that we call it our playground. You get to play with the data the way you like to. So some feedback that we received about the retention rate specifically is being able to compare certain populations against institution-wide and institution-specific and system-wide. So one that we heard a lot, maybe a traditional versus a non-traditional student, seeing what that 1 year retention rate looks like institution-specific as well as system-wide, being able to see that trend across. So we just had a few parameters that we added here, but of course, depending on what the data looks like, we can always add more parameters. But this is what our feedback kind of gave back. So we can look at first generation versus non-first generation, and these filters still will work together. So if there was a specific program, say it's education, you can narrow it down as much as you would like.
Yeah, and what I was seeing when, we all had Power BI on our desktops, so people started creating it like you can do with Excel. And what we saw is like a lot of one item dashboards. It was only one thing. When we started working with Deloitte and we kept pushing them to add more to these dashboards. I don't know if this is really one dashboard or 100 dashboards underneath by the time we're toggling back and forth, but we learned a lot about what the capabilities of Power BI are through Deloitte. They had some expertise. We still have some expertise on the team, and we were training up along the way too, because we didn't really have, at the time when we decided on Power BI, we didn't have a single dashboard. We had, we had staff that were using like Cognos and staff that were using Tableau, and all of a sudden we had to ramp up. And it's been a great partnership because we're learning a lot from us, and then we're developing any partners at the institution level or any partners that any other vendors are building in this same model for us. So we're using the executive exploratory and informed insights on all of our functional dashboards. So it's been really well received by our leadership, and people are throwing dashboards my way to say, could you make it look like that? Next, we're going to This is the one I was mentioning to you. This is the HR vacancy report. Since we are all in one USG Connect, we could look into the system and pull information out of the system. And when we did that, we ended up with a lot more vacant positions than we knew we had. We know we don't have this many vacant positions, but we're like, what's wrong? So the first thing we did was put a toggle on there. Oh, it must be all student positions that are not filled. So we have the toggle up top to include them or to exclude them. And you see, not much is changing. We still have a tremendous amount of vacant positions. So when I met with the CHROs on this dashboard, they were very positive about it. They all wanted to understand how we were actually calculating this and how can they help get this corrected. So this is an example of the system shows all those vacant positions, but what we learned is in our current environment, you could leave a position vacant, just create a new position that's really filling that old position. And so some practitioners are actually doing that. And you'll end up with, like, several schools have over 5,000 vacant positions that really aren't there. And so if you go into the Informed Insights tab on here, we actually have at the bottom of this dashboard, they could actually see what positions we're talking about and being filtered. So they could go in there and kind of clean it up, if you will, and say that position's not really, and getting a lot of feedback from, you know, certain categories, and then our shared service center could actually clean those up for them. And then we also got into the vacancy duration. There's some issues with that. So again, through business process improvements, we're going to improve this dashboard along the way. But it was eye-opening when we first did it. But it's a good thing. The chancellor always says, you know, it's better to know it's bad data and fix it out there forward. And we're going to transition to capital projects. This is one of the dashboards that I really enjoyed working with Sandra Noisy and her team on the capital projects. I had very little interaction with her because they use a system called eBuilder, and a lot of our work comes out of PeopleSoft or Banner. But this gave me an opportunity to work with her and her team on capital projects. I'd sit in a board meeting and the board members would say, well, where are the firms or contractors coming from? Where are they located? And how many projects do we have? So Sandra and I got together with Deloitte's help, and we came up with this dashboard that can be used for our total projects. Now, these are capital projects that we manage at the system office. Not all your projects at Georgia Tech, for example, are in here. It's only certain ones that I think there's a $500,000 threshold or something like that. That makes it a capital project. And so we have 61 projects going on. Again, this executive view, how much money? And $1.5 billion in projects. And we have 67 firms. And we'll show you on one. You want to go to exploratory first? Yeah, on the Informed Insights, we actually have project insights, and then we have the firm contractor insights. So if you click on the firm, you could actually see who we're contracting with, which is a real common question from our board members to make sure we're using Georgia agencies on our projects, et cetera. And so they're able to see that at a glance now. And then if we go to the exploratory, this is one where we've been avoiding the Q&A for a little while, but the Q&A is one of the cool tools that we learned about through the Deloitte process, where you can actually ask a question of the data and it will try to produce the answer for you. So if we go in here and ask how many projects are at Georgia Tech, There's 6. It'll give you the answer at the bottom. So you could do a thing and you could change the graphics in there. And if you click on the X, Tiffany, show them these are pre-established questions that we thought people might ask. So you could just click on those. And there's my pie chart. That's very important. Yeah, very important. I think we're gonna, does anyone want to see anything else? Any other dashboard? I don't know if you can see it from afar, but anything you want us to drill down into, Don? Yes, yes, yes. Well, I know you can see that in Informed Insights. I don't know if the question and answer will answer it yet. This is kind of like a chatbot. You got to teach it and train it with synonyms and things like that. We could try it.
Yeah. So the more times we ask it questions, the more it learns. So if we haven't asked it any specific questions, it's going to try to figure out what does it mean when we say when and what type of project. But the more you ask it questions, then we can. But we can try it.
Yeah, it's definitely in the Informed Insights component. You could see everyone.
We can, in the Q&A, you can also make fields available that may not be in the dashboard and vice versa. So like on the academic side, we restrict the extra field on the academic side that you can some charts that may not be on the executive.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, come on. What are the projects at Georgia Tech? And I think if you just type GIT. Yeah, so it's starting to get smarter, but it takes a little time, yeah.
Can you do after projects, comma, and then add the actual amount? Like what are the projects?
The reason it's saying cost is red, so I bet you it's not in there as cost. Yeah, so it's pretty good. Put it at the beginning, pie chart. As a pie chart.
If this works, I'm gonna be so happy. Hey, look at that.
Yeah.
Look at that.
There you go. Good job.
Good. Don't clap. Don't clap.
It's a pie chart. So anything else anybody wants to drill down in or see? And otherwise, we'll flip over to just standard questions about the project. Or anybody have any question? Yeah.
I've got a comment about the data. I don't know why you can. As context, just so you guys know, for those that are interested, it's not.
Correct. Correct. Yeah, and we'd love to work with you to get this as
Yeah, no, we would love to get it all together on our side.
Yeah, exactly.
If y'all wanted to have it.
Yeah. Yep.
I would ask Brian this, but I know the answer is going to be just hire him, so I'm going to ask him instead. Where do you guys get from here? This is awesome. This is fantastic. The chancellor's going to change. I have to change data sets. There might be minor changes to the That's it. This is going to chancellor saying, hey,
This, I'll tell you the truth, I guess. The chancellor, when we first, he said, "This is all you're getting, Rich. This is it.
Yeah.
Figure it out." but we got to a point where we got, and I understood that. I understand why. We have a team that, again, was transitioning and they're learning, so we could actually maintain those. We've been working, everything that ended on September 1st when our contract with Deloitte ended, we now maintain. And so we have people going in there and fixing them, updating the data. Can we get better at that? Yes, we have a long road ahead of us. They gave us a resource roadmap. So I went to leadership and said, okay, Deloitte says we need these 7 people to maintain this and keep it going. And the answer was, figure it out, find the people in their current roles, but with support. Like if we needed 1 or 2, they just said, we're not going to get you 7 positions, which is understandable, but we need to start transitioning people who are doing different things into this model, right? A lot of people we're still, and that's a challenge with any project, as you all know. The lights have to stay on. So like the academic data collection, all that stuff we do still happens. And one of the things that chancellors really challenge us with is getting more consistent data early, right? Like we get our enrollment reports halfway through the semester. So, you can't do anything about a school's enrollment when it's halfway through. So we started some dashboards to get information. And I'll call it almost crawl, walk, run. We're crawling in some areas. We hope to get to walking and then hope to get to running, particularly in the admissions area. So that's part of our focus of the next phase is to get more data as it relates to the admissions. We never collected admissions data at the system level before. And, now with enrollment being so critical, I always use the example, my daughters, they got into college and they only applied to one college, and they're twins and they got in. And my wife and I were sitting around the table with them and they were acting up a little bit. And we're like, you better apply to another college in case you get kicked out of that one you get in. So they applied to a second college late with no intention of going there. But if we had that data, we'd be able to see what's going on here. These people were accepted at this school and then applied 3 months later at this school. We need to follow more of that, particularly as enrollment numbers start to decline, but not in Georgia. Doing good this semester.
I'd also say, Rich's team and that USG team, everything's still new. Like I said, we did this so fast that they're still now adjusting. I think over time, what will happen, you have to think now they get, probably hundreds or thousands of data requests a year. A lot of them are done one-off ad hoc. The data models that we've started them thinking about is even some of their current data models. We showed them ways that how we can expand. It's like I mentioned, we added was like learning support,
right,
first gen, dual enrollment, were they ever this? So thinking about building stronger data models. So now if you get a data request, you can click in a dashboard and get your answers. So ways of thinking of how they can be more efficient, which is going to save them time, but continuously to build on this platform. I think there's going to be some time savings. Yes, there's going to be some maintenance and upkeep of this, but a lot of times what we'll see is that efficiency. They'll begin to work. They're going to spend less time, I think, doing more of the administrative pieces of it, but more time actually analyzing and interpreting.
And we did learn some lessons. One of the goals we asked Deloitte to help us with is making the data automatically refresh so we don't have to touch the dashboards. Just put the new data in every semester. And what we learned pretty quickly, we were going to show you the financial aid dashboard, but we loaded information from Georgia Student Finance into our data warehouse and it updated the dashboard. And that's only half of it, doesn't have the Pell data yet, so it looks kind of wonky. So there's a lot of lessons learned there that we have to figure out, the timing of things and making sure everything is up to speed. Good question. Yes.
Data and also assignment organizations as well.
That is a great question. The question is related to spatialization, and we are working on a dashboard on that. But again, it's the data that we have at the system level, so we'd have to work with your institutions to make sure. But we would love to do that, make sure we have all of the information that you have. And that's part of our goal with this whole project, is to enable the institutions, not necessarily at Georgia Tech, but some of the smaller institutions that don't have these data capabilities, to put some of their data in and match it up to ours. But yeah, that will be coming in what we're calling phase 2. We'll have some data about spatialization, but you'll have to look at it and say, does it look right, right? And it's going to be similar to the facilities data, I would assume, because we do a lot with classroom, but I don't know if we have all your other data. Good question.
Curious, and I kind of want to follow on both. That enters the missing data. Have you had any instances with conflicting information?
Yeah, we've run into some of that where most of it has been caused by timing, like when we pull our data versus when they pull their data. And some of it is because of the missing data, that they're pulling it a little bit different than us, because they have like we found out from one school, they have a table in Banner that has HR information in it. We were like, what? So they were pulling from that, and the numbers were coming out a little bit different, but we haven't really run into anything where we couldn't define or find the issue of what the difference was.
One example, we did pull in some of the PeopleSoft financial data, and we compared that to a report that institutions were filling out, sending it to the system, and they were aggregating it. So now we're pulling live and now comparing it, and that was another timing issue with PeopleSoft. The good thing is now, ideally in, next year or so, that, maybe institutions don't have to fill out this form, just make sure the data is ready. So we may even eliminate a process that institutions have to do now. But that was a data mismatch where the timing was off, or maybe they made a change in PeopleSoft after they submitted that report to the system.
And that's always been one of our challenges. It just it's exaggerated by this dashboard. Like when we do financial data, we could pull it on 18 or 22 institutions, and then we got to get it from the other 4 because they're not on the same system. And we do the same thing as it relates to the non-hosted Banner schools. And so it's an exercise, again, that crawl, walk, run. We're crawling in some areas, but we're doing well in One USG Connect, but you saw the vacancy dashboard because of business process. So this has really surfaced a lot of good information, and we'll continue to clean it.
Partner, they said that dashboards are manually look pipelines. That issue of crash that. Is from the perspective of unified ERP, how do you anticipate keeping these dashboards others?
Yeah, so I'm not the most technical person when it comes to the in-depth technology, but we are trying to move to the Azure cloud and the whole suite, and we are using those pipelines today. When I say manual, it's just manually feeding that data in rather than doing a web service or something from the other system. But we are we're starting to learn more about the capabilities there, and we're in this phase 2, we're now talking about, Power Apps and things like that, using those as well as we move forward. But the whole goal is to move everything eventually to a cloud-based solution going forward. And with the unified ERP, we think it's going to be easier because we're all going to be in there, but we do have to worry about the transition. What I've been cautioning people on is we've done things historically here with cohorts. When I first came to Georgia in '93, there was like 7 cohorts of Banner, people going to Banner, and everybody went to Banner a different way. That's not how it's going to work in the unified ERP world. We may have 2 cohorts. We may have 1. It's going to be a lot different. And, you know, on one USG, our lesson learned is we started with the small schools first, and that was very painful for them and painful for you all at the end when we came to you and said, okay, now we want you on a system. You added things to it and everybody had to test it again. So we will be starting with the R1s, and all 4 of them will be in the conversation on everything we do as we move forward. I'm actually speaking to the presidents on Tuesday, and we'll mention that to them that we need their support. Got to be an all-in approach going forward.
I would say it's mainly integration and standardization. So like right now, the dashboards themselves refresh, I think, daily. So if new data's there, it's going to pick them up. An example with the integration, like you all on Workday. So when we did the financials, we had to work with their team to manually get the export out of Workday, bring it in, merge it with the other 3 instances of PeopleSoft. So we were able to successfully do that. I think there were some changes with some of the signs were different in Workday versus Banner or PeopleSoft. So it's the integration. That's going to be the current challenge of building automations to grab this data from all these systems. Same thing when you go to admissions. Now you got some data in Banner, some data in the CRM. There's going to be conversation about how do we now integrate with the CRM. Standardization, as Rich mentioned, there's so many different business processes. Even, at Valdosta, we had different business processes across the academic colleges, how they enter courses, lab lecture combinations, and that. So standardization is going to be key, and hopefully when those things align, that'll make the ERP transformation a little less painful, I'll say. But the way we designed the dashboards is we can just fit this new RP into these models. Just like now we're able to do the PeopleSoft and Workday financials into a financial dashboard. We didn't show the financial dashboard, but we have a financial dashboard that combines those sources now.
That was a really good question, and I will tell you, it made me think of what we're always talking about. This project was 80% data. Getting the data in the right spot. The building of the dashboards was about 20% of the effort, as you all know. Like it was getting it, like they were able to whip up some of these dashboards pretty quickly, which I lost a lot of sleep because it was taking us so long to get the data together, and then I was praising them when they got the dashboard together so I could show something.
You mentioned not a lot of people were using your old dashboards. Are you saying increased usage?
So one of the things we're doing, I've seen it a little bit, but we're also tracking it. So we're pulling the data usage analytics, and we're actually going to create a dashboard of it. So we'll have a dashboard of dashboard usage, which is kind of strange, but that's one of the things we want to do. But I will tell you, my phone was blowing up with text from some of the chancellor's cabinet. They're like, how does he know this? I'm like, he's looking at the dashboard. They're like, he just said this. How does he know it? I'm like, I gave you all access to the link, but he's looking at it. So the usage is really important to us. And we don't want to have a dashboard out there. If it's not going to be used, then we'll get rid of it and, build something that is going to be used.
I think the difference for me is like when you saw enrollment or retention rates, you saw the up and down green arrow. There's a little, you probably couldn't see under that says, hey, you're X% away from your goals. So even when we do just single KPIs, we have other context to say, is this going in the right direction? So I think that's a big difference here working with the USG team. Everything had a purpose to address to the strategic standpoint, you can see all those metrics, but then functionally work with each of the functional teams. So from a functional standpoint, some of the dashboards will have a slightly different design because that functional area is specific. So while we have a common theme, that we did make things specific for within the department and really addresses their needs as well.